The next award is presented to John Langalibalele Dube and accepted by his grandson, Langa Dube. The citation reads, "The Mahatma Gandhi Satyagraha Award, posthumously awarded to Dr. John Langalibalele Dube on the 18th of September 2012 in recognition of his dedication, commitment and hard work to reinstate dignity, self-respect and unity among the oppressed people of South Africa and to promote quality education."
Thank you. Master of Ceremonies, Your Excellency, one of the great African products in Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, we thank you for honoring this occasion today. You know, you've always been with us during our dark days in our struggle, and even at the dawn of the democracy, you've continued to with us. We thank you for keeping that relationship going as one big family. I remember the days, during the dark days of our struggle, when one was considered as one of the prohibited immigrants when we crossed the border from South Africa to Swaziland, and we were asked whether should we be taken back to South Africa. We said no, Zambia is the only place, and indeed we knew that we were going to be warmly received. And with the role that you played during your presidency in welcoming us together with the fellow Zambians who are our brothers and sisters, we thank you. Furthermore, I would also like to take honor of all the excellencies that are here, commissioners, members of provincial government, under the leadership of one of our great leaders in our Premier, Dr. Zweli Mkhize. We are quite honored as well for you to grace this day when some of our great leaders that contributed towards the change that you still continue, to nourish. And it goes to show that South Africa at no stage will ever run of great leaders. Those that came before the current leaders, it goes to show they've learned a lot of lessons in the likes of Mahatma Gandhi, in the likes of Inkosi Albert Luthuli, in the likes of John Dube, in the likes of many other great leaders, Steve Biko, people that actually chanted the way right in the deepest, oppression, when our people were not given, the voice, but made sure that there is progression. Today we're enjoying the fruits of our liberation, of our democracy. And indeed, people like Mahatma Gandhi, as we today experiencing these awards, which are enshrined into the non-violence and peace, we know that they actually lived under very severe conditions. And for your information, those of you who doesn't know that Gandhi spent a lot of his life in one of the darkest areas and very informal area which has just acquired some change just after 1994, where there was no electricity and water. And some of the people that can actually bear testimony, it's our comrade Mewaram Gobin, who actually stayed at Inanda. Same goes with Mama Ila, the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi. Inanda is one of very unusual townships because it always been home to both the Indians and Africans, and there's always been peaceful coexistence, where it culminated in 1985 because of the peaceful coexistence, which was so much of a threat to the apartheid masters. Then they actually created the skirmishes. Some of our people were maimed and some of our people were killed, and there's no one who wanted to take responsibility, but the people knew who was responsible. And indeed that unity still exists even up to this day. That is why we still have people that stay in Inanda of Indian descent, and there's still that continuity that was always existed. And if I can just highlight just a brief similarities between Gandhi and Dube. Way back in 1900, in 1901, when the doors of learning were opened at Inanda, it's my grandfather that made sure that a black child received education right up the hill at Ohlange. And right further down, the hill at the Phoenix settlement. And Gandhi also started a school there. And they went on. In fact, they lived during the same era, during the same period. They were both leaders, making sure that they want people to benefit. In fact, some of us are born with different skills, but they both born to serve. And indeed, they did serve. That is why today we have this occasion, an occasion of this nature. And they didn't stop at that. When my grandfather started the first black newspaper, Ilanga Lase Natal, way back in 1903, and further down the hill, during the same period, in the same year, Mahatma Gandhi started the Opinion and the printing press. So there was a lot of similarities. When my grandfather co-founded the African National Congress, which was then the African National Native Congress, and Mahatma Gandhi down there, he also co-founded the South African Indian Congress. So there's quite a lot that one can expand on. But I want us, we as those that are still living, I also like to pay honor and tribute to the thought by the Gandhi Development Trust, to give honor and acknowledge those people who contributed in their various ways, that still live today. Because we have a tendency of mainly honoring those that have passed on, but the more we give more awards and recognition to the ones that still live, it's going to give those that are sort of not encouraged, or maybe those that lack motivation, to also do something to contribute towards the advancement of our democracy for the benefit of our people. Because we all know that our people out there, they still want to be nurtured. They're like birds that still needs wings to fly, but the mothers always make sure that they get fed, and the more it is able to fly on its own, then it's able to fend for its own, and also takes care of the forthcoming generation and the next. Same goes to the leaders of today, those that are still living today. So we need to take some lessons from them and say, okay, what is it that I can see so and so is doing so much for the people? What is it that I, as a person, can do in order to make sure that we cover the sector and make sure that there's mutual benefit for everyone? Ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to be long, but I also like, on behalf of the Dube family, to thank the consideration by the Gandhi the Development Trust of honoring and also acknowledging the works of our grandfather by honoring him with this award. And I also like to pay tribute to all those that actually braved, their commitments to come and make sure that they want to embrace this occasion to be a success of what it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Langa. The next award is to Mewa Ramgobin. And the citation reads, the Mahatma Gandhi Satyagraha Award presented to Mewa Ramgobin on the 18th of September 2012 in recognition of your consistent, relentless and courageous contribution to the struggle for the liberation of South Africa.
Guys, all right over here on the crosses.
To address us.
What is it that I say? Honorable President, former President of Zambia, my mind goes back to 1975. Zweli, the Premier of KZN, my mind is just as wild as KZN is. But Mr. Sir Paddy, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I want to include somebody in my introductory remarks, but you must forgive me from referring to the founder of the Gandhi Development Trust as Ilu. Nice to be here. After having listened to the various speakers, one begins to wonder as to what is it that we are about? What is it that we fought for? Why did we say as early as 1971, then when we get liberation, that we will convert Robben Island into a place of worship? Not the conventional worship, Sue, but the worship of sacrifice, the worship of love, the worship of giving before asking, the worship of the knowledge that the price of freedom and justice is life itself. This was inspirational from the life and works of Gandhi. And for those of us with all our limitations who understand this, will concur and must concur, not with the erudition of Sue Britton, but the content of what she has said. And I want to allude to that in a greater depth in the few minutes that have been allotted to me. I'm saying to us as South Africans that South Africa belongs to us. There is no point in saying it belongs to us all, regardless of color. There's no point in saying that it belongs to us and cherish the thought that it belongs to us. but we do not have the sense of saying that we have got to nourish it. And if we do not nourish it in the spirit of the Gandhian idiom and the spirit of the Freedom Charter, then it is, in my view, superfluous. Ladies and gentlemen, somebody mentioned this earlier. I think it was on the screen. That it is not enough for us to say that South Africa belongs to all of us, black and white. If we do not invoke the values of the Freedom Charter, and you read Gandhi into it, you read the Bhagavad Gita into it, you read the Bible into it, and you read the Quran into it. If we do not imbibe the spirit inherent in these value systems, then I think it is superfluous. Because it challenges us, and Gandhi constantly challenges us, that we have got to make South Africa livable for all who live in it. Because if you and I reflect today, how do we contextualize Marikani? My South Africa, your South Africa, my Freedom Charter, your Freedom Charter. How do we contextualize Marikani? How do we contextualize the non-delivery of services? How do we contextualize the situation in which our educational system is in? Come with me to Inanda, where we talk about Dube, we talk about Gandhi, we talk about Shembe, we talk about the Inanda Seminary. It is the heritage root of our province. Indeed, beautiful heritage. But please come along with me and find out as to what does life in Inanda mean in relationship to Dube, Gandhi, Shembe, and Inanda Seminary. Now, in 1971, to bear testimony to what I'm going to say to you, Ila Gandhi is here, Vajo Hari, whom I brought particularly to this meeting to say this. The youth in those days were the pivot and the anchor for what we could do. Because generations away from them, people had become incorporated, if I may use the word, into the apartheid system. The Bhikkhus that we talk about, the Pirchianis that we talk about, the Praveen Gordons that we talk about, the Zak Yaqubs that we talk about, were strong, focused, and with a vision. To do what? Today we see the fruits of it. But I believe that these people will be questioning, this is what we have fought for? Is this the South Africa that we wanted? And I'm saying, and I plead with all of us to celebrate the life of Gandhi. I want to end up on this note. And Paddy, excuse me for taking half a minute more. You know, I was on Robben Island the other day, after many years again, not as a prisoner, as a strange visitor, visiting a place which was pronounced by some of us that when we get liberation, we'll convert Robben Island into a place of worship. And I asked myself, standing in the corridors of Robben Island, where we celebrated the 100th anniversary of Satyagraha, for the welfare for all, which in the context of what we are celebrating, called Sarvodaya, how much do we do? What is to be done, which is Satyagraha, on the basis of the truth that this is one world, like Stu Britton says. This is the only world that we have. How much reverence do we have for life, let alone the environment, let alone animals, let alone water, let alone Mother Earth? How much reverence do we have for life for us to ensure that there is welfare for all? The Gandhian trinity of ahimsa, for me and for us at Phoenix, and I hope for you, must mean not non-violence anymore, but the reverence for life. And Ila, thank you for inviting me. Your letter was beautiful, your invitation. I won't tell you what she wrote, but thank you all. Thank you, Paddy.
The next award is to Dr. Dennis Goldberg, and the citation reads, "The Mahatma Gandhi Satyagraha Award presented to Dennis Goldberg on the 18th of September 2012 in recognition of your courageous, outstanding and relentless contribution to the struggle for the liberation of South Africa."
Okay, looking this way, please.
My comrades and friends and the dignitaries, and Comrade KK, who gave us such support in the struggle for freedom. After I was released from prison in 1985, I ended up in Zambia, and I walked down Cairo Road, and I saw, even amidst the poverty, what freedom could mean for the self-confidence of the people. I got jostled into the road. Sometimes somebody else got jostled into the road, but there was no animosity. And I felt, well, we're on the way as South Africans. I must tell you that tonight I'm a little bit of a dilemma. When Ella told me that, or her organization told me they were going to award me this Satyagraha Award, I said, but I took up arms, you know. I didn't sort of add the detail that I was the commander of the 1st Umkhonto weSizwe training camp inside South Africa. Of course, that came back to haunt me a little bit, got me 4 life sentences. But I had some great moments during that trial with Nelson Mandela as the number 1 accused, and Walter Sisulu next to him, and then me and Umgov Mbeki and other great comrades with us. And Nelson Mandela made that speech that took 4 hours, in which he explained why he'd taken up arms and issued the call to take up arms. You saw a little excerpt. There was the need to overthrow a tyrannical regime. We had tried everything else, and the proportions in South Africa as compared with India were a little bit different, in the sense that at the time there were 400 million Indian people and 10,000 British soldiers and administrators, and they could go home to England. No country in the world was going to take 5 million white South Africans who believed in apartheid. Do you think they wanted our policemen and bricklayers and miners and the hateful attitudes that they held? And so there was a different kind of struggle. We took up arms to bring peace, it's true, because apartheid depended on violence as an integral part of its very system. And we took up arms to put an end to that system so that we could live in peace. And we've struggled to do that since. I want to say that in the end, Nelson Mandela inside prison and Oliver Tambo outside with his comrades, and Oliver Tambo doesn't get the recognition he deserves for 30 years of dedicated leadership that brought us to freedom, and he then died without actually enjoying the fruits of that leadership. But he and Nelson Mandela were such close comrades, can I say bosom buddies. There was no rivalry. And when OR gave over the presidency to Nelson Mandela, he said, "You entrusted the ANC to me. I've cherished it and I've nurtured it, and I hand it back to you stronger than ever. And in effect, please look after it." Tremendous words of selflessness. But he was Commander-in-Chief of our armed struggle as well. So forgive me, Ella and the Trust, if I raise these contradictions. And if I say to Sue Britain, thank you for taking up the issue of end conscription campaign and getting young white soldiers not to occupy the townships. But it did take religious and faith groups a very long time to come to the point where they had to act on moral grounds. Thank you for doing it. Sitting in prison for 22 years, I have to say I wish you'd done it earlier. Forgive me for putting it that way, but you see, we did have an armed struggle, and not until it was said, not a graveyard, white graveyard in South Africa was not occupied by young whites who had been killed in the defense of apartheid. Only then could young whites begin to say, the moral pressure on me is too great. Now, I'm no theologian, but I was released in 1985, the year of the Kairos document. Kairos, I read in the document by Christian theologians, is a Greek word for a moment of crisis, of moral crisis, when one has to re-examine all one's beliefs. And even the Kairos document raises the issues of wealth and poverty, of power, of violence, the need to resist, and in certain circumstances justifies the taking up of arms against a tyrannical regime. So you see how I'm caught in this because I believe in peace. Let me fast forward to Americana. A very serious situation. My father was a trade union activist, shop steward, led strikes. And he was born in England, I was born in South Africa. And so when I see workers not in unity, I'm appalled by this. Now we tend to talk about Americana as a place where 45 people lost their lives. And we talk about the massacre of 45 people. But for me, as a believer in working class unity, there were two incidents. The first was when workers killed 2 lowly paid policemen, 2 security guards, and 6 other workers. Workers were killing workers. How can this be in our country? We really have to do some work. Can we just lay it down to desperate poverty, desperate wishes to change? May I, as a non-African person, ask, where is this Ubuntu we talk about? Has our society so destroyed, to echo Mewa, our values of human life itself? Do we just kill each other? When policemen are killed, and they are killed every week in our country, tragically, because of the depths of violence and criminality, who do we blame? You know, we ended the apartheid system by negotiation. It was financially and morally bankrupt, partly because of the armed struggle, of the tens of thousands of Mkhonto people and some others in camps who could not be allowed to march by the apartheid regime to take over South Africa. They militarized the state, they bankrupted the state, and in the end, Cold War was coming to an end. There was the need for a peaceful transition. And we, led by OR and by Nelson Mandela, agreed to the talks and negotiated a peaceful settlement. We didn't defeat them militarily. We could not impose our will. We had to do a deal that left economic power in the hands of the haves. And I'm amused, or cynically amused, by our media talking about the Lonmin mine and the poverty of workers and low pay. Our media say, what's the matter with these capitalists who think only of profits and not of workers? Don't you find it amusing? I'm a communist. This I've fought against all my life, this terrible exploitation. I've fought against apartheid, not just because it was the oppression of white people over all black people or non-white people, but because it was a system of cheap labor and massive exploitation. If you go back to 1909 and what did they call it, the National Convention of White Politicians that set up the Union of South Africa, they spent a year talking about how they would control the lives of Africans to ensure cheap labor for the mines, for the farms, for industry and commerce. That was apartheid, comrades. And when we did the deal to end apartheid, we have black economic empowerment for people who have acquired all the attitudes of big capital in their relation to the exploitation of workers. I can mention names, and perhaps I should. We have members of the National Executive of the African National Congress who are directors of big mining companies. Some are even chairmen of big mining companies. Do you think their companies pay better wages or create better working conditions for their workers than any other companies? Of course they don't. They're capitalists. They're there to make profits. And so I have to say to those who have inherited the privileges of property and wealth and education, like me and many others, what are we doing about it? How are we going to close the gap between low-paid workers and better-paid workers and managers? I heard the appalling figure that the general manager of Mvelapanda Holdings earns over 1,000 times more per year than a low-paid worker. How can that be? How can it be that the women who work in the supermarkets take home, if they're lucky, 30,000 rands a year, and the CEO takes home 30 million a year? Something wrong with our society, comrades. And so, how are we going to take on the peaceful struggle? I do believe in peace, despite having taken up arms when it was necessary. How are we going to... Well, I don't see the possibility of a socialist revolution right now, you see. Just to be honest about that. How are we going to take on highly skilled workers who love it when there's a 10% increase across the board, because 10% of their 200,000 a year is 20,000, which is just about more than the annual wage of low-paid workers. The increase is more than the annual salary of low-paid workers. How are we going to stop that across-the-board process and managers with their huge salaries, and civil servants, and chief directors and director generals, those of you sitting here, my comrades? And forgive me, comrades, really, premiers and cabinet ministers who allow judges to set their salaries, and judges, form the committee that determines the salaries of top people, because they're totally impartial, you see. And what are the norms they adopt? The social divisions of apartheid that we've inherited. This is the tragedy of our country, and our constant calls for equality. When we have formal political equality, and for those who've struggled out of the mire of poverty into top jobs, the advertising industry called them black diamonds. Can you believe this? You know, they're the ones who import the expensive Mercs and BMWs so that they really look good, you know. Doesn't matter about the poor, spending the poor's money from taxes. How are we going to take them all on in a serious socio-economic struggle for the future of our country? And I would say it is in the enlightened self-interest for the haves, who are no longer just whites. There are plenty of others involved. How are we going to persuade the haves that they have to sacrifice something, quite a lot, to ensure that the lowest paid and those in the deepest poverty are going to see a massive and quick improvement in their lives, so that workers don't feel so desperate they kill workers, march armed workers, and police react and overreact, I believe, but I'm prepared to wait for the Commission of Inquiry to report, because serious stuff we're talking about. In the interest of protecting property and the wage distribution that we have. So coming back to why did I accept this award, Ella? I wanted the opportunity to try out these ideas. I've been thinking about them a long time. I've been deeply concerned for a long time. I must say that I've not wanted high political office. I was assured I could have it if I wanted it, but I wasn't in the struggle for my benefit. It was in the struggle for equality, for humanity, and because, well, I've been married twice and my widows have left me quite well off. They were comrades as well. So I'm not in want, I have to confess that. I wish I could help more. I wish the ideas I had put to leading politicians about these issues of closing the gap between the wages of entry-level workers and cabinet ministers way back in 1995 had been listened to. I wish people had listened then about the need for some more central planning of the growth of our economy. I'm glad that a president who derives from KwaZulu-Natal, President Zuma, has set up that planning commission. Really admire him for it. Everybody accuses him of not being intellectual. There's been a lot of intellectual development in government. I'm impressed with it. Peace, believe in peace. I'm deeply honored to be given this award, and I'm deeply honored for another reason. President Kaunda quoted from our Freedom Charter. We declare for South Africa and the world to know that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white together. We ended that Freedom Charter with, these freedoms we shall fight for side by side all our lives until we have won our liberty. Well, in the formal sense, we've won the liberty. Let me echo Sue, a luta continua indeed. And we're living in a time when that idea of South Africa belongs to all who live in it is being drowned by an impatient group of young black African leaders whose view is South Africa belongs to black South Africans alone. A very narrow national chauvinism. I know where it comes from. I know the origins of the belief. But as a moral human being, as we all are, otherwise we wouldn't be in this hall tonight, we know that we can make personal choices about what we support and where we should be going. There are national minorities, not just whites, coloured people in the Western Cape who are told they're superfluous, too many of them. There's still racism of Indian, African kind. I'm very happy to hear about Inanda being a place of tranquility. But there are others in KZN who play on these differences and historic differences. Comrades, there's a hell of a long struggle ahead of us. That's why I accepted this award, to be able to say to you, thank you for honouring what I've done. I'm nearly 80. My plan is to last till over 100, because there's so much still to do. Join me in doing it. Thank you.
The final Satyagraha Award is to Justice Zak Yaqub. And the citation reads, the Mahatma Gandhi Satyagraha Award presented to Justice Zak Yaqub on the 18th September 2012 in recognition of your consistent, relentless and courageous efforts to draw world attention to the oppressive apartheid laws and to uphold human rights and justice for all.
Good evening, everybody. It is indeed an honor to receive this award this evening. I found it impossible to believe that I had been chosen. I'm humbled by the fact that I received this award, and by receiving it, fall into the shoes of so many others who received the award before me this evening, and so many others who received the award before, whose courage, whose sense of morality, whose sense of sacrifice was far greater than I could ever imagine myself having. I recognize in receiving the award the many people who I have learned from, the many people who have died so far in the struggle for our democracy. I recognize with sadness that more people will also die in the process of our struggle for democracy, which is far from complete. And it's particularly wonderful to be seated at the same table as Comrade President KK, which I never thought would happen to me. It's humbling indeed to have been sitting right next to Dennis Goldberg, and you'll be happy to know that after listening to what he has had to say, I came to the conclusion that the less I say, the better. Now, I want to say one thing though, and that is that all of us made some kind of mistake, I think, which Dennis has alluded to in some ways, and so have all the people who say that the struggle continues. I don't think that we achieved our democracy even in a formal sense at the time when we adopted our new constitution. For me, it has always been patently clear that the suffering, misery, the inequality, the horrible lives that people bear are going to continue for a very, very long time. And the only impact of the Constitution, for me, is that it provided us with a kind of framework, a launching pad, if you like, to be able to conduct the struggle for our democracy in a new way, in a different way, in a more creative way, so that the rights conferred in our Constitution are not necessarily rights for people to enjoy. The rights conferred upon us by the Constitution have been conferred upon us so that we as human beings can get together collectively and in every other way possible to utilize those rights in order to achieve the constitutional project. And the constitutional project is the abandonment of suffering, is ensuring the kind of society the Constitution contemplates. Everyone is not equal before the law. There's no freedom of association in our country. No one's dignity is respected and protected as it should be. So all of us have the duty to achieve the constitutional project and to use the Constitution as an instrument to achieve the kind of society we really wish to achieve. Otherwise, the Constitution will not be worth the paper on which it is written. And I want to end by thanking my family, my friends, everyone who's here, and everyone who has helped me to get to where I am. And for me, the greatest meaning of this award is the recommitment of myself, and I'm sure all of us, to dedicate ourselves towards the achievement of the constitutional objective and the realization that we are not there yet. Indeed, we are very, very far away, and we must get there as soon as we can. Thank you very much.
We've had some wonderful speeches. Now we're going to have some music. Nonku Mchali of the Star College, which was founded by the Turquoise Harmony Institute, is going to sing a Turkish song for us. Nonku.
İyi akşamlar, meaning good evening. My name is Nonku and I go to Star College, and I hope you do sit back and enjoy. Thank you. Şu dünyadaki en mutlu kişi mutluluk verendi. Şu dünyadaki sevilen kişi sevmeyi bilendi. Şu dünyadaki en güçlü kişi güçlükten gelendi. Şu dünyadaki en bilgin kişi kendini bilendi. Bütün dünya ona inansa, bir inansa, hayat var olsa, insanlar el tutuşsa, birlik olsa, uzansak sonsuza. Bütün dünya buna inansa, bir inansa, hayat var olsa, insanlar el tutuşsa, birlik olsa, uzansak sonsuza. Şu dünyadaki sevilen kişi sevmeyi bilendi. Şu dünyadaki en güçlü kişi güçlükten gelendi. Şu dünyadaki en bilgin kişi acıyı gülendi. Şu dünyadaki en üstün kişi ünlü bilendi.
Butunda yamuna inansa, binansa, yaparamosa. Isala tutursa, bilikosa, usansa sosuza. Butunda yamuna inansa, binansa, yaparamosa. Isala tutursa, bilikosa, usansa sosuza. Butunda yamuna inansa, binansa, yaparamosa. Isala tutursa, bilikosa, usansa sosuza. Butunda yamuna inansa, binansa, yaparamosa. Isala tutursa, bilikosa, usansa sosuza. Da da da dee da da dee da da da dee da da da da dee da da da da da dee da da da dee da da da dee da da da da dee da da da dee da da da dee da da da da dee da da da da dee da da da dee da da. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nonku. We now invite the Premier, Dr. Zweli Mkhize, to address us.
Thank you very much, Program Director Mr. Felikani, the leaders of the Gandhi Development Trust, Comrade Ila Gandhi, and the other members of the board, His Excellency, our father, our stalwart, the father of the free Zambian Republic, and of course, our greatest inspiration, President Kenneth Kaunda, the High Commissioner of Zambia to South Africa, Mr. Chikonde, Judge in the Constitutional Court, Judge Zaki Yakub, and our leader, Mr. Dennis Goldberg, the commander of the first unit of Mkonto Sizwe, the mayor, deputy mayors, councillor, Fozia Pir and other councillors, the speaker, the honorees, the Lutuli family, Bigo family, and Susan, and all the other awardees who are amongst us. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening to you all. I do want to thank the Gandhi Development Trust for a wonderful event, honoring our heroes, honoring our stalwarts, and bringing up the memories of the contributions that were made by the great people that have been part of our struggle for freedom. It is indeed a wonderful evening. I want to say to His Excellency President Kaunda that in any part of South Africa, whenever his name is mentioned, it remains an inspiration. It's always been an inspiration to listen to the stories of your life, sir, but it's also been an inspiration knowing what you have done. But for you to be addressing us, taking us through the history, through the memory lane, and taking us through all that you have done, indeed we feel especially honored this evening. And we must say that your contribution in the freedom of South Africa must rank amongst the topmost contributions, because to house, to nurture, to protect, to clothe, to feed, and most of all, to inspire the people of South Africa to continue the fight during the difficult days when they knew out of Zambia there was no free border. Each of those borders still needed to be liberated, and around all the countries around Zambia had to be liberated with your contribution. And we must say that amongst you rank, of course, amongst those fathers of a free African continent: Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Julius Nyerere, Eduardo Mondlane, and many others. And you will always remain the inspiration to us. And for us, South Africa will always be eternally grateful for your contribution. It will be difficult to go through each and every one of the contributions and the speeches that have been made, but I must say that Steve Biko's legacy has remained that of this whole philosophy of our people having to also focus very deeply on the issue of psychological emancipation, to believe in ourselves and to believe that we are capable of doing everything that anybody can do. I want to also pay tribute to my leader, Comrade Dennis Goldberg, and all the things that you have said. I want to come back and comment a little bit about them, because I believe we need people who must talk straight and also must talk to everybody's consciences. The leadership, particularly from the Natal Indian Congress, Mayor Arab Gobind, Zek Yakub, of course, it sounds like just a few years ago when the NIC was the only voice that was able to speak when all the organization had been smashed, and that you continue to do what you did remains also a remarkable contribution. And the whole idea of what people like Sue have done, I lived at the time also when when you were a South African and you were caught up in that situation. You had to find a way of joining the struggle. If you are a white young man in particular, you were going to join the army, and there were those who were caught in between. And it actually has assisted to have a number of white South Africans who believe in democracy, because they made everybody understand that when we talk about non-racialism, it is possible to create such a country, because not all the white people were supporters of apartheid. And that you might take as a very slight issue, but in fact, at some point, that's all that made a difference in terms of what choices people had to make during those days. The whole evening is dedicated to leaders such as Dr. John Dube, some of those pioneers who led us through this path of our freedom. And I think the true spirit of Mahatma Gandhi has been that it was able to revive or ignite in us a human spirit to fight for our rights. And that spirit is a spirit that we all possess amongst ourselves today. It is important for us to look at South Africa. And I'd like to commend Judge Zek Yakub, your comments about how do we understand freedom, democracy. Do we understand it as the end that should have come in 1994, or do we understand as a changing platform from which to fight for justice, for peace, for human rights, and to ensure that we can ultimately fight and defeat poverty, inequality, unemployment, and all the troubles that we face? President Kaunda was singing about how we can defeat the scourge of HIV and AIDS. It remains one of those challenges. The problems of orphans, the problems of women who are abused, children who are abused, all of these remain challenges. The crime, all of these remain challenges. But what can we take out of the history of all the people that are being honored is that there are those whose determination and commitment stood far above the challenges of the time. And that, I think, is what we should face as a challenge. This country is facing a lot of challenges. There's been a reference to Marikana. I want to say, I don't believe that those workers, even though by the time the police went there, 10 people had died somewhere in the mysterious activities that took place there. But I don't believe that when they set out on their protest program, they actually wanted anybody killed. Similarly, I don't believe that the police, when they went to deal with that issue, that actually set themselves that they were going out to war. I just think that something did go wrong. That is why we call it a tragedy. But we need to look into ourselves and ask ourselves whether can we take any more such things going wrong? Maybe ask differently. How do we make sure that no such wrong ever happens again? There are a number of challenges that the country faces, but I believe that one of the things that is important is for us to begin to embark on a program that must not only stabilize the country in terms of a long-term plan, that must begin to define one joint program that all of us will focus on as to where exactly the country is going. And the Comrade Dennis Goldberg has commended the President Zuma for devising such a plan. Inside that plan, it's not only about